Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Talking Niagara this morning with me, Peter Giblett, and Mike Cushman is here for his second week.
Morning,
How you
Niagara
doing,
Falls.
Mike?
How are you, Niagara Falls?
Yeah, how are you doing?
Good, a little bit tired, but ready to go. It's a Monday, feels like a Monday.
You said you don't lie in. What do you mean? You get up like at 6 o'clock every morning, including Saturday and Sunday?
Yeah, I'm on the farmers hours. I go to bed early, get up early all the time. Even if I go to bed late, I get up early. It's just in my nature, eh? So
Yeah,
I,
I get
I
it.
figured I might as
Mm,
well go to bed early since I get up early no matter what.
You mean you mean come what? Well, you see, the thing is, yeah, I'm an early riser,
Yeah,
but I also don't go to sleep early.
yeah, that
There
could
is
hurt.
Well, actually, no, I've trained myself pretty well. I did it ever since I was young. I go to bed. I go to bed midnight. And I wake up 6 o'clock. 6 hours sleep is all the body needs.
That's about all I get, anyways, too. So I agree.
Anyway, okay. So I've seen from a couple of posts now on Facebook. Rick Rose has died. He's a friend of this show because we were down in the studio at one point, and we would have been in the studio, but for the fact that there was people sleeping above.
Right.
um, it was an apartment bedroom above the studio, which when it's later in the day is not a problem, but when it's when it's first thing in the morning, there are people speaking, um, and that's a problem, I guess. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
guess that's part of the lease they signed.
Well, that's a loss to the music community and the music community of Niagara because he's been around a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So because he's one of our local music stars. Um, and actually been, he set up 4680Q in order to in order to encourage local music.
Yeah, he's taught music and played music around here for a long time, and I like his music too. So that's a big loss to the community.
Yeah. Well, we have some interesting thing is we actually do have some pretty interesting interesting musicians here, some of which have been actually on tour with famous bands, etc.
Yeah, we had Honeymoon Suite. They were a good band. Seen them in concert with Foreigner, and they were better than I thought they'd be. I grew up with a couple of the guys. I've known them for a little bit, but uh, when I went and seen them live, they were very good live. And I hear there's a couple young singers around here that are pretty good. Some girls. One guy I was talking to, his daughter sings, and she was doing some benefits and things. And she's supposed to be a very good musician too. So hopefully we have some up and comings too.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was a guy, there was a young kid who was about 12, 13, 14, that type of age, who was singing down at the, what do you call it, Hard Rock Cafe. They have that little kind of mini stage out in there for the downstairs, on the ground floor.
Right? Was
And
it Evan Rotella?
I don't remember his name, but
There's another
yeah,
young talent we have that sings really well.
yeah, I don't remember his name. I just know that he used to sing there quite often.
Oh, we have some local bands like the Mad Hatters and stuff, and they're good bands. So yeah, there's a lot of good musicians, and Rick Rose probably taught a lot of them some music, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah. And if that is true, it's very sad. I've seen it now on a couple of Facebook posts, but I haven't seen it from anybody who's close to him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Right?
you showed me that this morning. And I went on Facebook and looked. I haven't seen any posts yet, but
Yeah,
that'd be a big loss for Niagara's community in my mind.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, moving on from that, Canada has purchased this Inuvik hangar in basically commonly known locally as the Green Hangar. It's a 21,000 square foot facility at an airport in Nunavut, Inuvik, Northwest Territories, and it's been purchased by the Canadian government for $8.6 million. And the move has been kind of met with relief by some Northerners and experts in Arctic security who are alarmed by foreign interest in the facility.
Yeah, well, the national security of Canada used to lease this building. And when the lease ran out, they stopped leasing it. So why did it take so long for them to buy it when they know our neighbors in Russia are looking at expanding and taking over other people's territories? I think this is long overdue, and I think they need to invest way more and more security for our country, because Russia's eyeballing Canada and North like crazy, and they're all set up to take it.
Well, and the thing about this is we need to be protective of that border, especially with how close, when you're up there, how close Canada seems to be to Russia.
Yeah, well, I got a friend that was an RCMP officer, and he told me, you aren't aware of how many times Russians are coming across on boat and getting caught here, Russian spies and stuff. And it happens a lot, and we don't realize it, but we're pretty close to Russia. Yes.
Well, and the thing about that is that we're sandwiched between Russia and the United States. And if they want spies in the US, which better way to poke them in than through across the Arctic?
Yeah. There were some interesting stories that this guy had. Of course, he can't share them with the public, but
of course.
But it was surprising and a learning experience how much really goes on out there.
Yeah, I guess that, and I guess that's a troublesome thing, but also we kind of need that. We kind of need things like AWACS support up jets, planes up there as well, don't we?
I think they need to beef it up big time. I mean, even invest in maybe some missile security systems. I think Canada is long overdue to start setting itself up to protect itself, especially after Russia's shown that they want to expand and they're willing to take it.
Yeah. The thing about this, though, is our current government doesn't seem to want to do anything about it.
Well, this hangar is an example of how long they drag their feet before they spend money, right?
Yeah.
If the Canada National Security already had this hangar under lease and moved out because they didn't want to pay no more, how long did it take them to buy it after that? It's just an example of how the Canada drags its feet in investing in military, and our military deserve better.
Well, I think that's particularly true of the Trudeau government, right? We seem to have a government that's convinced that, hey, we don't need to spend on military spending. And I'm not one to push military spending, because I think most governments in the West overspend, but I have to say that I think that, Canada is distinctly underspending.
They're underspending, and they're almost an embarrassment. When Trudeau government goes there and talks to NATO, and they're telling him that he has to meet our minimum standard of payment, right? What is it, 2.5%?
Yeah, and we're only at about 1.3 or something.
And then the Trudeau government looks them in the eye and say, yeah, we're going to get there in 2032. And by the way, we're going to give $5 million more to Ukraine today, in the same sentence. That just doesn't make sense to me. I think.
Well, the worst is, I think most people in Canada want Ukraine, want to help Ukraine, But the trouble is sometimes that sending money to Ukraine isn't actually getting to where it needs to be spent. And we do have a semi-corrupt government in Ukraine.
Corrupt government everywhere, really. I mean, you name a place that would be in war, and money doesn't get shifted here, there, and everywhere corruptly.
Well, that's one of the biggest problems about, humanitarian aid around anywhere around the world, isn't it? We've always ended up, the people who need it are still starving.
Yeah, even when we're trying to feed people, it ends up in the wrong hands, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
it's a real problem of not tracking money, especially in today's age when you could directly send it, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like that's what kills me. You could directly send it to somebody in today's
Yeah,
age. You don't have to put it in the bank and they take it out, right? So
exactly.
I'm
If you,
really shocked
you
at
know,
some of the mistakes made like that.
yeah, I could be in some of the remotest parts of the world, in the Galapagos Islands, or the Antilles, or Outer Hebrides, and you could still e-transfer money to me, and I'd get it in about 30 seconds or
Yeah,
less.
so if you could
You know,
send it directly to somebody, why do we have this problem?
yeah, yeah.
And
But
it's
aid, of course, is a different problem. Okay, so with this hangar, it's not just a case of having the hangar. It's a case of we've got to actually operate from there as well. So why did the military actually give it up? Do you know?
No, I'm not reading that here of why
Yeah.
they gave it up.
No, I
That
don't.
doesn't
No, I.
doesn't really say, right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing
No.
just the lease went up and they wanted to save money.
Yeah. Well, you see,
That
with
seems
any government facility, why the heck doesn't the government own it?
Yeah, that's when do you make that investment, right? If you're leasing it and you know the lease is coming up and you have nowhere else to go,
Yeah.
don't you come to the conclusion that you have to buy it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I get it that maybe, okay, so you are building a new highway somewhere. Let just take that example. I get that if you're building a new highway somewhere, you might need a headquarters, the highway building, headquarters right near one of the areas of that highway. There, you only lease the land because you need it for 5 years or 10 years or something like that while you're getting the highway completed. That's a different matter. But where you've got something like this, you should have bought it from the outset.
Yeah, and the disturbing report was the US is asking Canada to buy it because Russia and Chinese were showing interest in the site.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
that's a frightening statement, man.
yeah. Actually, one of the things is, how can the Russian and Chinese governments even think about buying land in Canada?
I'm getting the
Yeah,
feeling
it's
that this
true.
is a common occurrence.
Yeah, it's true that up in the north, we have tons of land, right? Because,
Yes.
hey, I could drive. I could drive takes we could drive if we set out now, we could probably by the end of today get to somewhere like Timmins, or Sioux Lookout, or somewhere like that, way up north, by the end of today. And then if we went further up into the northern reaches of northern Ontario, it probably is another day's drive on top of that, isn't it?
Yeah, we got a lot of land, and people don't realize how much land we have. And up north there, that's a huge swath of land that's not used very often, right?
Yeah.
But it's not our land. That's Univit's land, right?
Yeah, I get that, but again, there are towns and things up there, and of course, a large point about why we don't go up there is because I don't know how much colder it is in the summer than here, but it's significantly colder in the winter than here.
Yeah, and this looks like a very good investment by Canada, and I hope that they beef it up more. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm getting pretty nervous about Russia.
I'm very nervous about Russia, and I don't know why, but we always look at Russia as potentially looking at Europe as being their biggest cause of concern. But one of the biggest challenges that the Americans always had was the fact that when it comes down to Russian armaments, etc., they would have always, had we been during the Cold War, they were concerned that those things would be coming over the North Pole almost any time, weren't they?
Yeah, isn't that the reason for them selling Alaska, basically?
Well, Alaska, yeah, but that's 150 years ago now, isn't it? When they
Yeah,
pulled
but
Alaska.
I'm just wondering if that was the original reasoning of selling that land to make sure that America could still protect the part, right? Like, because we got no protection against Russia. If they want to take our land, they're going to take it.
Yeah, but the Americans bought Alaska from the Russians.
Yeah,
Yeah. So actually, it was an important purchase. In hindsight, it was a massive, great purchase, an important purchase for the Americans. We just don't know. It was kind of, well, brilliant stroke of genius, if you like, but
yes,
we
I
didn't.
think it was, and
Nobody.
it was strategic, I
Yeah.
believe, right? Like,
Yeah. But nobody knew how strategic at the time because Russia was a backwards, flailing country at the time,
right.
you know.
So yeah, all in all, I think it's an investment needed, and I hope they beef it up even more. Um, I really fear that Russia's got a plan to expand into Canada. They've had it for about 20 years. They've beefed up all their military in the northern parts there, and they're ready to move while Canada's just sitting on their hands.
Yeah. All right. Officially 9 a.m., Gary. uh, Laurie, morning. Huh? She's not here. Okay. All right. Well, I haven't seen her anyway. She might be listening. Yeah. All right. Going on to this. Okay. So those across the country now, those Palestinian encampments on the universities are all being dismantled slowly.
Yeah, it's been a long
Oh,
time that
there
they've
we
been
go.
there.
Laurie is here. So morning, Laurie.
Morning, Lori.
Yeah. And those encampments have been around a while, and the interesting thing is about them is, like, I don't know, McGill particularly was disgusted by them, but they've been on pretty well every university campus in the country, and now they pretty well all agreed to dismantle them all at the same time.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, eh?
Yeah.
When do
Well,
when do you think a protest becomes, an occupation, right?
yeah, I don't know.
Because whenever I've protested, we leave that night. You know what I mean? Um, when
Yeah,
does a protest become an occupation?
that's an interesting question there, Mike, because you think about it, we tend to, hey, it starts, I guess, with things like that truckers convoy that went to Ottawa last year.
Yeah, I even asked that question then too,
Yeah,
right? When does a
yeah.
protest become an occupation?
Yeah, and I've always got the viewpoint that everybody has a right to protest, right?
Yes,
Absolutely, everybody has a right to protest,
yes,
and doesn't matter whether you and I agree with what they have to say. They have that right to protest. So every sane person and every nutcase has the right to protest whatever their viewpoint is, even if they can only get 3 people out on the streets of Ottawa. It's a valid protest, somewhat come what may, right?
yes. I agree with
And
that.
and at the end of the day, you know, you're right. because it started with the truckers last year. They were here. They were here, and they came. They spent the weekend there. They spent several months there, and I get it. Come, make your noise, blast your horns, maybe spend the weekend. I don't agree with spending the weekend. You come in, you make your noise, you go, right? Thundering a whole bundle of a whole bundle of trucks down Parliament Hill and honking the horn would certainly get get Parliament up and concerned.
A great protest.
Yeah.
You just how long do you stay and occupy it? It becomes an
Yeah.
occupation. The people that live in that area are now getting harmed. And now you got Canadians against Canadians, which is what you didn't want in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So
And when does an occupation become a revolution type thing?
that too, right?
Yeah.
It could change into that very easily if you keep allowing it to fester, right? And
yeah. And the thing is about these pro-Palestinian encampments, they made their point, I think, right? But I also have to say that, hey, do you remember? You probably, I don't know, were you old enough to see the student demonstrations in the 60s?
the Vietnam demonstrations,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, those anti-war ones, they seem to be a lot more forceful than these ones.
Yeah, they were a lot more loud and boisterous, right? These
Yeah.
people are common casual, basically live their lives like normal people, and they didn't seem to be too loud, right? Like,
Yeah, and that's exactly it. They were just stuck there. They'd created this encampment and put it around the behind wooden barriers. I guess that here's the thing. We're in July. Don't tell the students, but they're on vacation.
yeah. When are you making a point with your protest, right? Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's at school anymore, mate.
Yeah. No, I think you have to tear it down, and I think you have to move them on and tell them, you did your protest. Find a different way to make your point. Like,
yeah,
there has to be different ways financially that they could harm these institutions to show them something different in power, right? Because I don't think the protest did much to the institution.
Yeah, and the thing is, the protests themselves have not stopped the war. They've not stopped that invasion into Gaza. And they haven't really managed to actually do anything really worthwhile.
Yeah, and in all reality,
into it.
Canada's not even at the table to talk about it to try and force the peace issue. They can merely suggest it over television and telephone conversations, but they're not at the table.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. One of the things there, though. Okay, so where was it? We've got McGill, University of Ottawa, and we've got BC, and we got University of Windsor, where basically all of these encampments are actually now going. They've all agreed to tear them up. They've come to a deal. One of the things I was interested in, there's an article here that said Jewish community speaks out against a deal to end the Windsor University encampment. I thought that was an interesting one. The members of the Jewish community are speaking out against this agreement. The Jewish Law Students Association at the university says the deal appears to align with boycott, divestment, and sanctions policies against Israel, which is, in his view, inherently anti-Semitic. I don't agree that it's anti-Semitic. The school has a very small Jewish population. To his knowledge, they've not been consulted on the deal, right?
I'm really getting disgusted at the abuse of the word anti-Semitic, and
Yeah,
just because you disagree with them doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic. It you
yeah.
know, it's supposed to be you hate the Jewish people and you'll do anything against them. That's anti-Semitic. So I don't understand the abuse of this word. And soon as someone says that when
Well,
it's out
there's
of
a
context, I kind of drop the whole article.
yeah. To me, there is now and always has been a difference between having problems with Israel and being anti-Jewish. Right?
Yeah, and
You can
and
be
soon
you can be anti-Israeli without being anti-Jewish.
yeah, just because you disagree with something that they're doing doesn't mean you hate them.
Yeah, and the thing is that, for example, most of the Arab-focused Middle Eastern governments have never recognized the right of the state of Israel to exist.
Correct.
Right? It doesn't mean to say, it doesn't mean to say that they are, they haven't been over the years concerned about the plight of Jews, right? Certainly, many of those governments during the Second World War would have been concerned about the plight of Jews,
Yes. Yeah, and
right?
and to sit there and watch the Palestinian people be displaced like the Jewish people, you would think the Jewish people would have some kind of soft spot in their heart for that.
Yeah, exactly. And you're talking about one traditionally displaced peoples over, taking being brutal against another displaced peoples.
Yes,
And
and that part never made sense to me.
yeah, and the challenge, of course, with a lot of this is that this battle isn't exactly new. Didn't start in 1948. Didn't even start with Zionism in the 1880s. It's been going on for thousands of years.
Yeah, and these things that are older than our country sometimes worry me because we don't really have a knowledge or an understanding or wrap our heads right around the whole issues that are underlying, right?
Yeah, yeah, and exactly. And I was doing some looking up, and many of those that we call Palestinians today were either Canaanites or Philistines back in the biblical times, and have been in that land for thousands of years before that,
Yes, and
right?
that in lies the problem of the deep hatred that's involved with this,
Yeah,
and why people can't let go of it.
and the Israelites also shared that land thousands of years ago,
Yes, yeah,
right?
well, it's the hub of the religions of the world, right?
Yeah.
So, um, it it almost seems crazy that you would have those religions so close to each other and then war always around that, right? Like it
Well,
is
when you
it's the
think about it,
opposite of what you would think, right?
yeah. Well, in fact, actually, that always has always bothered me. The toting, the gun toting religious person.
Yeah,
Hey, hey, if you read, doesn't matter which book you read, which religious book you read, peace is often at the heart of it, right?
yes.
And then you got these people picking up a gun and spouting the religious mania.
Yeah, and I don't know. I just don't see death and religion side by each. But when you read the Bible, there's a lot of war in the Bible.
Oh, absolutely sure there was. Well, just there was the supposed marching around for 7 days they marched around the wall, around the city of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. You know,
Yeah. So
not that I realistically believe the walls came tumbling down just like that, but clearly the 7 days was something symbolic about how they attacked it and everything. But you know, but hey, it is what it. Those stories are full throughout the Bible.
yeah, and even the Jewish Bible teaches you how to commit genocide. He vividly describes it.
Yeah. Well, but yet again, if we look at like the genocide that happened during the Second World War, I remember as a kid asking my parents why, and they said because most Jews don't believe in resistance, but don't believe in fighting back.
So kill them all.
No, see that Hitler was well on the way to doing so. In fact, actually, the interesting thing about those camps is that we never knew about them really until 1942 when the stories got back. There were stories that had come out through the late 30s, 40, 41, etc. 38 to 41, but nobody, for whatever reason, nobody believed those stories.
Yeah, and still today you got deniers, right?
Oh, you do have deniers.
And how
But
could
when
you
you
deny
go,
the truth? I mean, the truth
yeah,
is the truth. It was hidden from us for that period of time, and then once it was let out, it's a disgrace, right?
yeah, you
Anybody
just
that
need you just need to see one of those sites to actually see how horrific that was.
yeah, yeah, they're just
Right?
killing camps, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
what they did is a disgrace and should always be remembered and not erased.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point being is that having said that, um, you know, we have had a history. Europeans have had a history of pogroms against Jews.
Yeah, there's a lot of bigotry there throughout the
Right.
world.
Well, in fact, actually, in the year that Christopher Columbus conquered, conquered wasn't the right word. Sailed to America, discovered America, was actually the year that Spain reunited, and they took the last bastion of the Moors and recaptured that. And when they reunited, they basically said in Spain there is only one religion. The official religion is Catholicism. Nothing else is accepted. You either convert or you leave.
Yeah, and wow, you touched on a topic that's erased in history, the Moors, eh? Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, you think about that. They erased the Moors one way or another at that point because the Moors never came back.
Yeah, and the Moors left an interesting a lot of inventions and a lot of history, right? Like
Oh yeah,
uh they're a very interesting group of people that were basically erased from the history books.
yeah, and it was brutal at the time. But again, the interesting thing is that even though there are Muslims, there are Jews, there are all manners, Hindus, etc., all living in Spain today. That law is still on the books, ironically.
Yeah, eh?
Yeah.
Some of the old laws we don't know about, eh?
Yeah, some of the old laws. And when I'm looking into that, it's like, yeah, that law exists,
Wow.
still today,
Wow.
you know.
That's incredible.
Although that said, I've always, we have laws. Well, I don't know. England has laws that have been around for forever. Probably Canada has them too, because Canadian law is founded upon English law and extends above it, right?
Hmm.
But for example, there's this old law that every Englishman has to go and try do their archery on a Sunday.
Oh yeah.
After church, you had to do archery, right? I don't know when it was from, but probably about the Civil War era.
right?
Because probably the king wanted to train their, have his troops well trained. So probably, probably about 1600, I would think that law
Yeah, I
dates
was going
from.
to say that, and he's making sure that he has a militia too, right? Like so.
Yeah. Not
But
that that
still,
helps him
there's
win.
old tort laws that we don't know about that are still alive today, and if you find one and pull it out of the hat, sometimes it really shocks the courts.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There were some of these old laws, but for example, you have to go to the superior court for that, not the small claims court.
Right, right. So you'd open up a can of worms by using that tort law, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of them out there, so if we go back to, and that's actually at the end of the day when it comes to these these occupations that they had, the pro, well, let's call it anti-invasion of Gaza occupations of our universities. I bet they were, I bet they used some odd laws to actually get rid of them.
Yeah, they probably squeezed in a tort law to do that too. And the strangest thing out of all this, Peter, is uh, prior to Wednesday's operation, two Quebec Superior Court judges rejected provisional injunctions to have McGill encampment removed, and police had said they would not act against it until they received judicial authorization. So, like, even the Quebec Superior Court, I figured they'd be the first ones touting that they didn't have a right to do this since they can't even wear religious garb, right?
Yeah, but then the protests were not necessarily religious either, were they?
No, not. I didn't hear too many people say that, but as soon as they throw anti-Semitic in there, they make it religious, right?
I just think there's oddities in some of the people and how they've behaved. Um, you know,
Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't read any arrests or any violence, so that was
no,
good. You know,
no, absolutely, and I think that our students, our students are sensible people. I think the point was made, as you said, you know, um, and how long does it need to go on?
well, the other way you protest is you don't go to that university and give them your money anymore, right?
Yeah, but these students were already at that university when the war started, most likely,
Right, right.
or
But I mean,
committed
the
to
ultimate
join.
protest is to just say, I'm not doing business with you at all anymore, period, right?
But again, the student wants to come out of this with a nice shining degree, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. And how many of them wanted to live in Canada, but probably don't want to anymore?
Well, actually, talking about Palestinian protests, I was looking at there were, and this is really unusual. In Britain, there were 6 independents that were elected. Sorry, 8 independents who were elected. The Speaker of the House of Commons being one because nobody ran up against him. Number 2 being Jeremy Corbyn, who was a former Labour leader who won his seat in Islington North. And the other 6 all had Middle Eastern sounding names. I wonder how
Right.
many of them were, well known in their area, pro-Palestinian protesters.
Yeah, you don't know,
Because
right? They
yeah,
know. I'm sure the government knew who they were letting in, right? Like,
well, the reason I asked that question is that they all had Middle Eastern names, broadly Middle Eastern names. One of them didn't, but he had an English sounding first name, but an Arabic sounding surname.
right.
Like George Abdul or something like that. It wasn't that, but you get what I
Yeah.
mean. And
Oh yeah,
and
I get those phone
hey,
calls all the time when the guy says, "Hi, my name's Mike," and he's got an East Indian accent. I just hang the phone up.
yeah, yeah, and well, but then again, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are actually in. You're making a phone call to India.
Right.
That often, that could be that you're making the phone call to just down the road, Mike.
Well, many of those phone calls are coming directly from India, and you can hear them in the background too. So
That's true. That's true. In any case, we don't like those sales calls. We always hang up on the sales calls, and it's like, yeah, get lost, mate. The one that
I don't even give them the time of day.
We record all our phone calls at work, right?
Yeah.
And we have to because of law society requires that sort of thing. So every few weeks we get this phone call from Easy Psychics. Where you pick up the phone and it says, "Hello, we're Easy Psychics, and hang on for your local psychic." Right. Well,
and they couldn't tell nobody was on the other end with their psychic ability.
Well, I was going to say, couldn't they tell that my next action is click?
Yeah.
Because that's always what my next action is going to be. As if I've got time for you.
Yeah.
But then again, hey, that's most people's reaction is, "Hey, I'm from the Canada Revenue Agency." Click.
Yeah. So did any of these students achieve what they meant to accomplish and get the universities to stop spending money on war and stop spending money on the Jewish plight?
I would have to say, from what I've seen in these articles, an absolute big fat nada. No, they did not. Right. And though the difference between this and the protests in the 60s, at least they knew how to sing back in the 60s.
Yeah, they were a lot more boisterous, right? They seem to be a lot more happy people. Right now, some of those people protesting could have been students from Palestinian, and they might be a little nervous to be loud too, right?
Well, yeah, the other question, exactly, because if you're at school, your family spent a fortune to get you to go to McGill, for example. I think McGill is one of our, is one of Canada's finest universities, right? It's one of the few that's world recognized.
Right.
And so your family has spent a fortune to get you to go to McGill, and now you're out protesting. I think you'd hear it from Granddad.
Yeah, but you can't deny that protesting is a part of an intellectual way to do things.
It is. That's like the peace protest back in the 60s. That was an intellectual way of doing things, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if they achieved what their goal was, but are they going to be allowed to go back to the university next year?
Yeah. Interesting thing. Dave and I were speculating the fact that, hey, you're a student in the tent, demonstrating, but hey, Joe, it's 2:00. I gotta go to my math 101 class.
Yeah, I'm wondering if next year when they apply to go to the university, if the university will quietly say no.
Well, you don't apply for a second year. You normally continue on if you've passed your first year.
There could be some dirty politics happening there, right? Like,
that's always a possibility.
Know.
Yeah.
And you also have to wonder if there's any other way that these kids could find an angle to hit them on Wall Street or something to see who they're investing in and try and do something about it, because I don't think their requests were out of the ordinary. If you don't invest in war, it's a lot harder. If you don't fund the war, it's a lot harder for the war to happen, right? Like,
yeah. Well, yeah, but again, as Dave's been saying, all that happens is Netanyahu stares down Biden and says, "You need to give us a few more weapons," and Biden comes back and says, "Well, I could do that, but I want some commitments on peace."
yeah, it's a sad situation, and then and then when the United States says quit the genocide and they say no, the United States just sits on their hands. It's I know you have to let a country defend itself, but when they start to commit war crimes, you're supposed to step in.
Well, yeah, and you have to actually say no at that point, really, don't you?
Yeah. And it's a
Yeah.
sticky situation. It's a sticky situation where the United States has to protect the Jewish population from other entities other than just the Palestinians, and it's very, very scary situation happening there, right?
Yeah.
Very temperamental for even Egypt. What if Egypt changed their mind and went back to hating the Jewish people again? Then that whole area is in huge trouble.
Yeah, and actually, the funny thing is about that with Egypt is that I think that the Egyptians have actually done a wonderful job in relation to getting the humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Yeah,
They've been
they're
severely
trying not to let
restricted.
too many people in, right? But they still have to let them in to protect them, right?
Yeah, they haven't. They did stop them from exiting Gaza for a period of time, but they at least were actually helping some of the aid getting into Gaza from the south.
Yeah, they're in a hard spot, man.
And let's be honest, this Egyptian government isn't exactly a shining example of democracy either, is it?
No, no, they're I don't know. I find democracies on an edge right now, and it doesn't seem to be moving in. It seems to be a failing system. England,
Well,
United States, and Canada's following those two entities down the rabbit hole. And England and the United States aren't doing too good, are they?
Well, basically, the problem, if you think about this, is that there are several intellectual commentators, and whose name I forget right now, that basically said one of the biggest problems about democracy is it's a very expensive system of government. If a dictatorship, whether it's run by a monarch or a general, tends to be a lot cheaper to run the nation, because basically the rules are, and the rules are this, and you get on and deal with it, right? That's how they operate, those types of organization, those types of groups.
Yeah,
um,
if you're a dictator, it's a lot easier to do
yeah,
a
yeah,
cut the red tape, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you want a bridge built, the dictator basically says, "Yeah, and the bridge is going to go from here to there. Bugger your homes, I don't care."
Right,
Right?
right,
Whereas in a democracy, I want the bridge to go from here to there, but I do have to care about your homes, and now I have to negotiate you. I have to buy you out in order to make that happen.
right.
You know. And hey, Adolf Hitler built the first freeways, right? First highways in the world,
Right.
and he did that largely. Whilst again, they did that largely by kind of buying the land that was necessary. But if they, it, if anybody protested, they basically just took over the land. You know, took away the opposition, took over the land, and went on did what they needed anyway.
Well, yeah, in democracy, we created capitalism to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So hang on. Yeah. And at the end of the day, okay. So there's a, you know, at the end of the day, these protests had to come down. What I'm intrigued by is why didn't they take down? Why didn't the protesters take their own tents down? And they could have given them to the homeless.
It's a marvelous idea, Peter, and things that are overlooked because you're blinded by your own goals, right? So,
Yeah,
um, they probably just made their stand to the very end and then walked away. And like you said, all that extra stuff could have been used by somebody else if they're not going to use it again.
because those people clearing the site are just probably going to junk it, right?
Yeah, I would think the police are just going to roll it up into a ball and throw it away.
Yeah. Oh, in
And you
fact,
don't
actually,
know how they lived out there. It might have been a little bit disgusting too.
more than likely, because there's pictures in here of people with in the encampments. Basically, all they're doing is they're picking it up with picking the stuff up with a front loader
Yeah, yeah, that's what I figured they'd do. Just chuck it
and
all.
dumping it into a truck.
So yeah, if somebody had any kind of a heart, they might have thought of that beforehand, right?
Yeah, and well, I know that there's a whole question about homeless encampments, but hey, I'd prefer that they got some of this stuff.
For sure, they'd be able to
You know?
use it 100%, and they would
Yeah.
use it. That's for sure. Problem is, would they go back onto the to the campsites on the campuses and try and live there?
Well, that's an interesting question in and of itself, because in fact, actually, that brings up a different set of legal principles, doesn't it? Right? Because
Yeah,
for
you.
those people, their tents is there. You're removing them from a home, and the Superior Court has already made decisions upon that you can't make people homeless from their tents in most circumstances.
Yeah, well, we don't allow people to live on city hall property, but we allowed them to stay at McGill University for how long?
Yeah, 8
You know,
months. Yeah,
so there are double standards that were allowed on this demonstration. That homeless people aren't allowed to go live, at City Hall forever, right?
yeah.
I don't even see homeless encampments allowed to be there for 7 months like these guys were. So it's kind of odd that the courts found it okay.
Well, there's a homeless campment behind La Coco's,
Yeah, but they've
out
torn it
out
down
of the
and
way.
they've torn it down before, and the people keep coming back because the land's not being used there, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So they aren't allowed to
exactly.
stay there for 7 months, right?
Yeah.
I think
Mind
the
you,
homeless.
there was an interesting one is the encampment up on opposite Walmart,
Yeah,
right? It was interesting that plot of land has been empty forever. Then they bulldozed a corner of it, and now I don't think they're doing anything on it.
yeah, they made it look like they're going to be doing a big development, and
Yeah.
surprise.
Well, in fact, that always was supposed to be a commercial development. At one time, there was a question of they were going to open the Canadian Tire from McLeod Road was going to move there,
Oh yeah,
right? And then they merged these Canadian Tires, and it's like, well, we're a city of nigh on 100,000 people, and you look at how many Canadian Tires they've got in St. Catharines at 150,000. They've got, I believe, 3 Canadian Tires um, out there, and we only have one. Something wrong with that.
I thought Canadian Tire had it right, having one in the south end of the city and one in the north end of the city. I thought it was good. Um, I really like the Canadian Tire being around the corner from my house so I could walk there. It
Well,
was perfect. But
yeah,
I just thought
but you
one on
see,
the
here's
south end, one on the north end was a good setup. And
but again, I'll be honest. Hey, for me to drive to the one on McLeod Road was as much time as for me to drive to the one on Montrose.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
And right now that is the middle of the city where it is, but it's on a one-way street, which is ridiculous. So one entrance in, one entrance out. There's no other entrances, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they should never put things like that in place. There should always be different
Well,
entrances for traffic purposes, right?
but that's what happens with malls like that, right?
Yeah.
Trouble is, you've got a mall there, and you've got other things there as well. You know, so it is what it is.
I wonder how Canadian Tire itself did after they did that move. Did they find an improvement,
Well,
or do they
it's
need
a
more?
massive store. I
Yeah.
applaud them upon that, because in fact, one of the biggest, one of the things I remember one time, I don't remember what it was, but I remember looking online for something that I knew Canadian Tire did, and it was available in Welland, nowhere else. Right?
Right.
Do I really want to go to Welland to buy, a $20 whatever it was, right?
Right.
And I'm looking around everywhere else to find this, and eventually I did find a local store that had it. But in a way, what you want is okay. So I'm in two minds about these big box stores anyway, because I'm not a big fan of them, never have been. And I think there's time we need to actually get rid of it's time to get rid of the supermarkets as well.
I used to love having the neighborhood hardware store to walk to. It
Yeah.
used to be marvelous. Now you gotta, like you said, you gotta find it in a big box store, which in itself is a journey.
Yeah. And well, you see, I think we're kind of living the wrong kind of, in a way, I think we're living the wrong kind of type of how would you call it? We're going to these bigger and bigger stores, yet we live this more and more convenience, but yet we've forgotten some of the real basics in our society. I hanker for the greengrocers. I hanker for the fishmonger. I hanker for the local dairy. But
Yeah,
they're gone.
I think that you're right. Like they keep talking about making a city smarter so that you could walk to every place. And what the big box stores did, what did Canadian Tire do? They closed two stores and made one store for their convenience, not for mine
Yeah,
and yours, right? The
yeah,
banks
yeah.
do the same thing.
Well,
We
in
got
fact,
all the banks that have closed down. There's not even a bank in Chippewa anymore, right? So
yeah.
they did the same thing with banks. They shut down all the small banks and put one bank for their convenience, not yours, right?
Yeah, and notwithstanding what you might say about the land there, there's a plot of land that is west of the Gale Centre and north of the Palmer Diamonds, the baseball field there, that I think would be ideal for a new, doesn't have to be massive, but a new, smaller Walmart.
Right.
Right, that would be, we could if we had a Walmart there, that basically we'd have a Walmart in the north end of the city and a Walmart in the west southwest of the city. So we'd have a northeast and southwest Walmart, but yet we only have one Walmart in the city.
Right.
And in fact, actually, I think as I say, it doesn't have to be the biggest Walmart store, but it would work.
Well, cities and stuff could justify things like that on traffic studies, right? If you got a family on the far end always driving through the city to make it to Walmart, for instance, right? does it make more sense to have another Walmart so people don't have to drive that far, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have to start reducing traffic in this city because we're going to be total gridlock soon when they build all these new neighborhoods that are okayed.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
you see the gridlock that McLeod Road is in right now. That's going to be the state of our whole city in a couple years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they haven't even built the Morrison Street Bridge across the highway yet.
Yeah, and you know what? They still got to figure out a thing to do for the train tracks too, right? So they haven't addressed that issue for years.
Yeah, in my view, we need to build the train tracks. We need to build a bridge over the train tracks at Montrose. Right? We need to build a bridge over the train tracks at Thoroldstone. And we need to build another bridge, which is either Dorchester or Morrison.
And that's all for emergencies, right? Right now we got a train system that shuts down the city for emergencies. Yeah. If there's an emergency, there's no fire truck or ambulance that can make it there, right? Like,
well, yeah, but they have now with the fire station out west. That makes it a lot easier.
Yes. But again, you know, ambulance services might have to take the highway and go all the way around the city to get there because of that train track system, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a problem in this city for a long time. Ever since they tore the old bridges down, they never addressed the issue because they keep going to the railways asking for money instead of building the bridge and just charging them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They just basically, that's what they need to do. Just build the bridges. And I think we do it for 3. The first most important bridge is Montrose.
Yeah. And I think they should build the bridges and then let the governments argue over who's got to pay for it. Right. Really, you got to do the build first because we've been waiting over 25 years for this. And it's a serious issue in the city. Right.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Montrose Bridge is that's a significant in town route,
right?
Which takes a lot of people. Okay, you can argue, why the hell are you going from the north end of the city on Montrose all the way down to, let's say, McBain Center? Why wouldn't you go on the highway instead? Well, you know, basically, if you're on the road, why didn't you continue on the road?
Well, whenever there used to be a train, we knew where the bridges were, and everybody would take the detour, and the city ran fine. Now you're just in total gridlock until the train's gone. So, you know, the issue's been ignored long enough.
Yeah, we got to build bridges. Yeah, absolutely, we do. You know, all right, and of course, we've not been talking about the Palestinian protests for a while, but still, that's okay. Okay, so what we've got, Karen Fraser saying good morning, and Gary talking about Charter of Rights. I don't remember what the specific issue was about Charter. Oh, probably the right to protest.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we can kind of call it quits at that point.
Yep.
All right. Well,
we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Yep. And I thank everybody for being here and, you know, being great listeners. All right.
Have a good day, Niagara. It's going to be a hot one. Be careful out there.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Come on.